This morning I need one female volunteer from amongst our teenagers, one confident young lady. Who is going to be that person? Anyone? No one? Don't make eye contact with the preacher. Oh, okay. Sarah, thank you. Did you volunteer or did your dad volunteer? You were voluntold? Oh, you know how that works. Okay, well, let's start here today by, you know the game. We're playing the game of life here. You go ahead and spin the wheel, count the spaces, and move the car. That was a little weak. You can do better than that. There you go. 8. Oh, my goodness, all the way. Okay, Sarah, go ahead. Move the car, count out the spaces. Yeah, the whole thing. There you go. That's right. All the way. Okay, and that space has a life tile on it. Go ahead and stand in front of that microphone stand, and you can read the life tile for us.
You make such a beautiful bride.
What do you think that means? Go ahead and hang on to that for a minute. What do you think that means, Sarah? You make such a beautiful bride. You're getting married.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, here's your bouquet.
Oh, thank you.
And they're playing your song. Wait. Stop the music. There's something missing here. What's missing in this picture, teenagers? A groom. Oh, we can't have a bride without a groom, can we? Is there anyone that you have picked out? I mean, you know, I have the authority to do the, I'm not going to do that one. I've embarrassed you too much already. I'll take the life tile back. You can hang on to the flowers. Go ahead. I'll take your microphone. If you would go ahead and take the blue person, so to speak, and add that person to the car as your pretend spouse, right? Okay, because we're just playing a game here. Come on down and bring it in. And you're the driver. You're in charge. And that person will be your passenger. And now we are complete with a husband and wife. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to answer a couple of questions for us, okay? And these are just your opinion. So doesn't matter, whatever you think. All we're interested in is what you think. I'm going to give you some examples of reasons that a few ladies have divorced their husbands. These are real things that happen. You tell me whether you think it was a good reason for her to do so or a bad reason, okay? All right, so here's the first one. In 2015, Egyptian wife Yara Sayed al-Din divorced her husband after just 2 months of marriage because he had not bathed since the ceremony.
Ooh.
Yeah, 8 weeks, right? No bath, no shower. She asked him to, he refused, so she divorced him. What do you think? Good reason, bad reason?
Good reason.
Good reason, okay. All right, here's a second one. According to a British magazine, a Japanese woman who was obsessed with the Disney movie Frozen and had seen it many, many times over and over, divorced her husband because he said he didn't like the movie. Good reason, bad reason?
I think that's a bad reason.
I think that's a bad reason too. Okay, good. Here's the third and final scenario. In 2006, Russian wife Tatiana Karpov divorced her husband because she found out that while he was playing poker, he had run out of money and he had put her up as stakes in the next hand. Yeah. Good reason or bad reason?
That's a good reason.
That's a good reason. By the way, the end of that story was that the man lost that hand, and the one who won the hand of poker came to claim this guy's wife, and that's when she found out about this whole thing that happened, and she was so angry she left her husband and she took up with the man who won the hand of poker. Yeah, it's a weird story all the way around. Okay, one more question for you, and again, this is just your opinion. What do you think? And I know you haven't had the experience yet, but you're a senior in high school. You're a very intelligent young lady. Yes, of course. So give us what you think would be your best opinion to the answer of this question. What does it take in order for a marriage to succeed? And there are probably a lot of answers. You just give us one.
I think God and like Christ has to be like the firm foundation of the relationship.
Cool. That's a good answer when you're in church.
Well, yeah.
But I know that comes from your heart, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
And my dad.
And your dad. Okay, I will take the microphone back. Thank you for helping us. And as you are passing by the payday, wait a minute. You pass by the payday, so you get a payday. Thank you for helping, Sarah. The second stop on the life game board, and that's what our series of sermons is doing. It's tracing the game of life as we play that board game and going throughout some of the things that we encounter in that make-believe game. But the second stop on that life game board is the stop that says, you're getting married. Then it is immediately followed by several expense spaces. Pay for a wedding reception, pay for a honeymoon, buy new furniture, move across the country. Your new wife is a platinum purchaser on Amazon. Pay the bank $40,000. Your new husband just bought a boat and a truck to tow it. Pay the bank $65,000. Okay, those two spaces aren't really on the game board, but they probably should be, right? Because they do represent the reality of life. The point about those spaces following the you're getting married space is this. Marriage is difficult. It's easy to get married, but how do you stay married? We're going to study this morning an unusual story of love and marriage from the Old Testament. We're going to look at the love stories, plural, of Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were the three patriarchs of Israel. That is the forefathers of the nation. They were a father, son, and grandson. Abraham the father, Isaac the son, and Jacob the grandson. When Jacob became of marrying age, his parents sent him back to the land of their ancestry to find a wife of like faith. They were living at the time in the land of Canaan. The Canaanites were pagan people who worshipped false gods. They didn't want that for their son. And so Jacob went to the household of a distant relative named Laban. Laban had two daughters. The oldest was named Leah, and the youngest was named Rachel. Scripture tells us that when Jacob saw Rachel, it was love at first sight. He knew that she was the one that he wanted to marry. Their courtship is a great love story. Who doesn't like a great love story? And this one may be the greatest of all time. It teaches us about the committed love of marriage. God honors marriage. He developed a culture of commitment for marriage. We find that in one of the very first verses in the Bible, in which it tells us that God instituting marriage. In Genesis 2:24, marriage is defined with or described with these words: a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. That word united there means bonded, like two pieces of metal that are welded together in an unbreakable bond. That's the concept, the idea that God has in store in mind for marriage. Marriage was the first institution created by God. Before there were nations, before there were governments, before there were communities, before there was even a church, God created this institution of marriage, a husband and wife bonded together for life, building a family. Early God followers all honored marriage. There were no divorces in the Bible for a few thousand years. An example of that kind of commitment was Jacob, who might have had a good reason for divorce as we unfold the story. Let's begin to do that by turning to Genesis 29, where you can follow along on the screen, verses 18 through 20. It says, Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. It sounds like a storybook, doesn't it? A beautiful picture here, and it was a love that moved him to the point that he was willing to work and to wait for 7 years, bringing profit to his soon-to-be father-in-law in exchange for the hand of Rachel as his wife. And he did. He worked hard for 7 years. Finally, the time had come when he had completed his part of the bargain, and the wedding day was set. Verse 22 tells us in that chapter that Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But then, on the wedding night, something happened. Laban swindled Jacob, as we read in verses 23 through 25. When evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob. And Jacob laid with her. Perhaps in the dark of the night, perhaps due to the intoxication of the evening's celebration, Jacob didn't realize that Leah had been substituted for Rachel until the next morning. The morning's light revealed. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me? And then Laban gave this explanation in verse 26. It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Oh yeah, you see, we have this custom that no woman can be married unless her older sister has been married before her. Did I forget to tell you about that? Oh, how could that have slipped my mind? And so Jacob could have divorced her. It wasn't the woman that he chose, the one he hoped for, but he didn't. He honored that marriage. Laban suggested, finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work. And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. He honored marriage. God's followers always honored marriage. Jesus taught us to honor marriage. He was once asked about grounds for divorce by those who wanted to trap him in the controversy of the day. We read that in Matthew 19:3 when it says some Pharisees came and tried to trap him with this question, should a man be allowed to divorce his wife for any reason? Jesus had refused to get embroiled in the controversy. He answered the question by quoting that Genesis 2 passage that we read a few moments ago, and then he replied with these words, God never intended for divorce to be a part of the marriage experience, or something similar to that, as you can see for yourself. He affirmed that marriage should be honored. Our culture does not believe that marriage needs to be honored. We have developed a culture of divorce. You know the statistics. 40 to 50% of all marriages end in divorce. That's our culture's philosophy. If marriage doesn't work, just end it. Several years ago, a new TV reality series aired. It is now, by the way, in its 17th season because of its popularity. It's entitled Married at First Sight. Couples meet for the first time at the altar. They take their wedding vows. They set up house together. My first thought was, when I heard the premise of this whole show, that maybe since marriage doesn't work well in our culture, Maybe they're experimenting with resorting to the practice of the Eastern cultures of arranged marriages, where a couple meets one another on their wedding day. In those cultures, the arrangement is made by parents who are wiser and more experienced in life, and they put together a marriage which lasts for a lifetime. Divorce is nearly non-existent in those countries. Similarly, on this TV reality show, the couples are matched by a team of counselors and therapists who use what they describe on their website as scientific matchmaking methods to couple the participants together. They are told to trust the science. Where have we heard that? And then 6 weeks afterwards, the marriage is evaluated. And if it's not working, they simply get a divorce and move on with their lives. That is not honoring marriage. It's not what God intended. Statistics tell us that less than 20% of those married on that reality show have actually stayed together. So the divorce rate is more than twice what our national average is. The reason that arranged marriages work in other countries is that they have a culture of lifelong wedlock in those nations. In the United States, couples might take lifelong vows, but they do not honor marriage as a lifelong commitment. We have a culture of divorce. People are encouraged to end a failing marriage and try again as many times as it takes. How disgraceful it is that in our culture, marriage is so trivialized that it's now even reduced to a game show for the purpose of entertaining an audience. As people of God, we must ignore the terrible standards of our world, and we must follow God's plan. We must honor marriage. That's what the writer of Hebrews tells us in Hebrews 13:4 when he wrote these words, "Give honor to marriage and remain faithful to one another in marriage." We honor marriage by modeling commitment and staying together. That's what we promise when we stand before an officiant and take our wedding vows. We're vowing to stay together in sickness and in health and in joy and in sorrow and poverty and prosperity until death do us part. Do you know why couples stay married for 50 plus years? Some suggest it's because they are soulmates. They are so compatible. They are really in love. And those things all may be true about that particular couple, but that's not the real answer. The correct answer is they're able to stay together for 50 plus years because they have character. Commitment in marriage flows from character. The character to make a decision to honor your vows to love one another no matter what. Dr. Scott Stanley from the University of Denver says commitment is making the choice to give up all other choices. That's what couples who stay together for numbers of years do. They make a commitment to give up all other choices. Commitment does not look for greener grass. Commitment stays home and waters the lawn. You work out the problems in your marriage. You work at making your marriage the best that it can be. You love your spouse no matter what. You see, character is more important than even compatibility in thriving marriages. When we see commercials on TV about online dating sites, we think that it is compatibility and chemistry that are the keys to success in a relationship. That's not true. Compatibility is something you create over a long period of time in a relationship with another person. That's why you need the character of commitment in a marriage, to give that relationship enough time to develop a good compatibility with your spouse. Someone defined a perfect marriage with these words: two imperfect people who refuse to give up on each other. They are portraying the character of commitment. And so we honor marriage by modeling commitment. We also honor marriage by sending the right message. Parents, we are raising future spouses. We don't want our children to suffer the pain of divorce. So let's teach them to have the character of commitment. That's what Solomon did when he wrote the book of Proverbs. Solomon writes it as a father who's giving good, sound advice, godly advice to his sons. He's describing for them what a good life looks for. Picture, if you will, a father sitting on the edge of his bed at nighttime, or of his son's bed before he tucks him in, and he begins to relate to him a few things that he wants to settle into the boy's mind and heart, instructing him on life and how to have a good relationship with God and others. Then this dad says that he's picturing for his son this special future of a marriage. And he says, son, rejoice in the wife of your youth. In other words, be happy with the woman you married when you were young. That's Proverbs 5:18, by the way. He then says, son, you are a young man now, but when you are a little older, you will fall in love and you will get married. I want that for you. Be committed to loving your wife for a lifetime. Some of you have been given a divorce you did not want. Others of you have suffered through years of a terrible relationship. I am sorry for your pain. This sermon is not intended to scold or scorn you. I know, and God knows, you would have loved to work out your marriage and have a healthy relationship. But your spouse was not as willing as you were. God knows you have the character of commitment, but it takes two. God will bless you. God will bless us all for honoring marriage. He would bless our nation if we honored marriage as a nation, but we don't. We honor divorce, and we are paying for it. According to the latest issue of National Affairs magazine, published in the summer of 2023, just a couple months ago, the divorce rate of couples with children in the 1950s was only 11%. But by the 70s, that divorce rate had climbed to 50%. And it has hovered there since then. The article went on to note that since the 1970s, divorce has affected about 1 million children each year, and the consequences have been tragic. Many of those children have been made to suffer some kind of dysfunction because of a dysfunctional home they were raised in. It cites that children of divorced families are 2 to 3 times more likely to suffer from social or psychological disorders and are 2 to 5 times more likely to drop out of high school. The article also cited that girls from divorced families are 3 times more likely to become teenage mothers, and boys from divorced families are twice as likely to go to prison. The article said that those children of divorced families are 89% more likely to divorce themselves as adults and then to perpetuate this terrible, vicious circle for yet another generation. Isabel Sawhill of the Brookings Institution stated that virtually all childhood poverty can be attributed to family dissolution. All these millions of children who have been affected negatively by divorce for decade after decade and have raised up with that, been raised up and are now raising children with that same kind of dysfunctional outlook on life. Can you imagine what our nation would be like if instead of a quick and easy divorce, mom and dad had stayed together and worked it out? If they had stayed to raise their children together, living together to be a present role model in the lives of their children, providing the love and the security of a home that their children need. How blessed our nation would be. And God will bless the family that honors marriage by staying together. God blessed Jacob. He knew the love of 2 good wives. Not that I'm advocating polygamy. But from those unions were born 12 sons and a daughter who were the foundation of the nation of Israel. Rachel, the wife of his youth, the one he was smitten with, died giving birth to her second child. She only lived with him as his wife for a handful of years. Leah, the one he didn't want but stayed with anyway, lived a long life. She was a comfort to him in his older years. She died when Jacob was an old man, and it broke his heart. So that when Jacob lay dying, he made this request of his sons: bury me with Leah. Leah. Not with Rachel, the wife of his youthful passion, but with Leah, his wife of years of companionship. I recently counseled a young couple just before their wedding. She was worried about the possibility of falling out of love with her soon-to-be husband. I told them that love, in fact, does change through the years, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I explained your love will mature. It will not always be based upon the passionate feelings you have right now. That doesn't mean love is dying. It probably means love is growing. It's growing into something more dependable and satisfying than physical attraction. That's what Jacob learned. God will bless the couple who sticks it out when it is tough, with the joy of companionship in their older years. God will bless the couple who continues to love each other sacrificially by giving them a loving home. God will bless the couple who always gives their marriage another chance by teaching their children the virtue of perseverance. God will bless the couple who is ever faithful to their vows with a lifelong satisfaction of being a whole family. That's why we are encouraged with these words in Ecclesiastes 9:9. Enjoy life with your beloved wife during all the days of this fleeting life that God has given you. Thursday, August 8th, was a calm, beautiful evening. The temperature was a perfect 75 degrees. The sun was approaching the horizon as Holly and I rode our motorcycle around Atwood Lake. We pulled into the little diner at the crossroads in Magnolia for an ice cream cone. One of my favorite songs was playing on our playlist on the bike, and as I turned it off and we got off, I continued singing the lyrics, and I grabbed Holly and danced her around the parking lot. A man 3 or 4 years older than me was just getting out of his car. He asked how long we had been married. I told him 45 years. Holly declared, and he still dances with me. He laughed and remarked how nice it was to see us enjoying ourselves. We followed him in, and he sat at the counter to order his dinner. We stood beside him there at the counter and gave our ice cream orders and waited. When we received them, I handed the young lady a $20 bill, and she motioned toward the gentleman that we had met and said, "He's already paid for it." He explained that he and his wife had been married almost 50 years when she just recently passed away with Alzheimer's disease. There were tears in his eyes as he told his story. And then he ended it by saying, "You keep riding that motorcycle until you reach your 60th anniversary together." He knew the blessing of a good marriage. A good marriage is a blessing to our lives. God intended it that way from the beginning. As you know, I've asked our teenagers for this series to sit in the first few rows I want to include them in the introduction and have a little fun with that. But I also want you to pay attention, because these are words that you must take to heart. You will be tempted to develop relationships with someone of the opposite gender for many of the wrong reasons. Because you like the way that they look, or because they are very popular, or they have achieved some things that you admire. When really what is most important is character. You want to build a relationship with someone you know will always love you and will never leave you and will honor God's guidance for a relationship. You want to marry someone who will always be there with you. You look for character. And you too. Honor God by honoring marriage, by living it out the way that He intends, and be a role model to your children and your grandchildren of God's will for their lives as well. And God will bless you. God will bless you. Let's stand and sing together our closing song.